Hello, and welcome to this Anatomy Physiology Bio 201 video lecture on motor, sensory, and integrative systems. I'm Mr. Kennedy, and I'll be your guide as we explore this topic briefly together. We begin today by examining the idea of sensation. Sensation is the conscious or subconscious awareness of changes in the external or internal environment. Perception is the conscious interpretation of sensations performed mainly by the cerebral cortex. Each type of sensation is called a sensory modality. This includes touch, pain, vision, and hearing. Sensory modalities are grouped into either general senses or special senses. The general senses are listed here and include things such as tactile, thermal, and proprioceptive sensations. Special senses are things such as smell, taste, vision, hearing, and equilibrium. Different types of sensory receptors are involved in different senses. This is a picture of a first-order sensory neuron with free nerve endings. Free nerve endings are often used to detect pain, temperature, tickle, itch, and some touch. This is an illustration of a first-order neuron with encapsulated nerve endings. Encapsulated nerve endings are used to detect pressure, vibration, and again, touch. Sensory receptors for some special senses include gustatory receptor cells in taste buds, photoreceptors in the retina of the eye, and hair cells in the inner ear for hearing. This is an illustration of a neuron with a gustatory receptor. Receptors may also be grouped based on the location of the receptors and the origin of the stimuli that activate them. Exteroreceptors, which include hearing, vision, smell, taste, touch, pressure, vibration, and pain, receive information from the outside world. Interoreceptors monitor the body's internal environment. Proprioceptors provide information about body position, muscle length, and tension, along with the position and movement of joints. This table will provide you with a detailed summary of the classification of sensory receptors. Take a moment to review the basis of classification and the description of each. Somatic sensations. Somatic sensations include tactile, thermal sensations, pain, and proprioceptive sensations. Tactile sensations are those such as touch, pressure, vibration, itch, and tickle. This is an illustration of a free nerve ending which can sense pain, itch, tickle, cold, and warmth, along with your type 1 cutaneous mechanoreceptors, corpuscles for touch, also known as Meissner's corpuscles, type 2 cutaneous mechanoreceptors, and laminated Pacinian corpuscles. There are two types of pain, fast and slow. Fast pain is acute, sharp, or pricking in nature and perceived within 1/10 of a second. Slow pain is chronic, burning, aching, or throbbing, and is perceived a second or more after the stimulus. Superficial somatic pain often arises from skin receptors, while deep somatic pain arises from skeletal muscles, joints, tendons, and fascia. Stimulation of pain sensors in visceral organs is what we refer to as visceral pain. This type of pain usually presents in or just deep to the skin that overlies the stimulated organ. This chart provides you with the basis for understanding how pain is transmitted from organs to the surface or skin. Proprioception. Proprioception involves recognizing the position of body parts. Proprioceptors are found in muscles and tendons. There are two types of proprioceptors. They are muscle spindles and tendon organs. Muscle spindles and skeletal muscles monitor their length and are involved in stretch reflexes. Tendon organs are found at the junction of a tendon and a muscle and protect muscles and tendons from damage due to overstretching. Joint kinesthetic receptors exist within and around the joint capsule of synovial joints. They respond to pressure and acceleration and deceleration during movement. Joint ligaments contain receptors to protect against excessive strain. This is an illustration of each of the aforementioned structures. And this table will provide you with a summary of the receptors for somatic sensation. Take a moment to review the receptor type, the structure and location, and the sensation and adaptation rate of each. Somatic sensory pathways. Somatic sensory pathways carry information from somatic sensory receptors to the primary somatosensory area in the cerebral cortex and to the cerebellum. The pathways to the cortex consist of thousands of sets of 3 neurons classified as first, second, and third order neurons. First order neurons. Impulses from somatic receptors travel to the brain stem or to the spinal cord through first order neurons. Second order neurons. Impulses from the brain stem and spinal cord travel to the thalamus through second order neurons. Third order neurons. Third order neurons carry impulses from the thalamus to the primary somatosensory area of the cortex on the same side. The somatosensory impulses ascend to the cerebral cortex along 3 general pathways. The posterior column medial lemniscus pathway carries impulses from the limbs, trunk, neck, and posterior head. This pathway is illustrated here. The anterolateral spinothalamic pathway carries impulses for pain, temperature, itch, tickle, and information regarding the posterior head. That pathway is illustrated here. The trigeminothalamic pathway carries impulses for most somatic sensations. Tactile, thermal, and pain from the face, nasal cavity, oral cavity, and teeth travel through this pathway. Somatosensory impulses reach the cerebellum via the spinocerebellar tract. That pathway is illustrated here. Postcentral gyri, located on both parietal lobes of the brain, are the sites for the primary somatosensory area. Each region in this area receives sensory input from a different part of the body on the opposite side. This graphic illustrates how your brain interprets incoming information. The posterior spinocerebellar tract and anterior spinocerebellar tract carry proprioceptive impulses to the cerebellum. This table will provide you with a summary of the major somatosensory tracts and pathways. Take a moment to review each. Nerves that extend out of the brainstem and spinal cord are called lower motor neurons, or LMNs. These nerves innervate skeletal muscles of the face and head through cranial nerves, and skeletal muscles of the limb and trunk through spinal nerves. Somatic motor pathways provide the input into the lower motor neurons and are divided into 4 distinct circuits. The first circuit is the local circuit neurons, who are located close to the LM ends in the brainstem and spinal cord. Upper motor neurons make up the second pathway. UM ends take input to both the lower circuit neurons and the LM ends. Basal nuclei neurons assist the movement by providing input to the upper motor neurons. And last, the cerebellar neurons assist movement by control of activity of the upper motor neurons. Each of those motor pathways is illustrated here. UM ends extend to LM ends via two types of pathways, direct and indirect motor pathways. Direct motor pathways deliver signals to the LMN from the cerebral cortex. The indirect motor pathways deliver signals to the LMNs from motor centers in the basal nuclei, cerebellum, and cerebral cortex. There are two direct motor pathways used for voluntary movement. These are the two corticospinal pathways, the lateral cortical spinal tract and anterior cortical spinal tract, and the corticobulbar pathway. Those pathways are illustrated here. Indirect motor pathways, which include the extrapyramidal pathway, lateral reticular spinal pathway, and medial reticular spinal tracts. This table will provide you with a summary of the major somatic motor tracts and pathways. And this concludes our coverage of sensory, motor, and integrative systems.